Hello. In a dramatic escalation of tensions in the Middle East, a US airstrike has killed Iran's most important military commander. General Qaasim Soleimani was the commander of the Quds Force of Iran's elite Revolutionary Guards. They are responsible for Iranian foreign military operations and answer directly to the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Well, General Soleimani, who for many was seen as a charismatic national hero at home, was one of several people killed by a US drone strike as he travelled in a convoy near Baghdad's international airport. Iran has declared 3 days of national mourning and promised harsh vengeance. The Pentagon says the operation was carried out at the direction of President Trump. Well, Mr. Trump has not yet directly commented, but he printed this image of the American flag, the Stars and Stripes, at the top of his Twitter feed. We begin our coverage now with this report by John Donnison.
This is all that was left of a convoy of cars carrying Iran's most senior military commander. His killing by the United States will shake the Middle East to the core. Qaasim Soleimani was head of the elite Quds Force of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and a hugely influential figure in the region. In a statement, the Pentagon said the airstrike had been carried out at the direction of the president and that the US military had taken decisive defensive action to protect US personnel abroad. The immediate aftermath of the attack, which happened near Baghdad International Airport, was filmed by passers-by. Several other people with military ties to Iran were also killed. It comes in a week where simmering tensions between Iran and the US have boiled over. The American embassy in Baghdad has been under siege as pro-Iranian militiamen and demonstrators tried to breach its walls, angry at US airstrikes in the region. And yesterday, the US Defense Secretary hinted America might take further action against Iran.
I think it's important at this point in time to not make this a United States versus Iran issue. It's really Iran versus the world. It's Iranian bad behavior that has been going on now for nearly 40 years.
Last night, more than 650 US troops arrived in neighbouring Kuwait to provide reinforcements. All eyes will be on Iran's response. In a region already riven with conflict, some will fear this could mean another war in the Middle East. John Donnison, BBC News.
Well, let's speak to our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, who joins us from Kabul now. Lise, it's difficult to overstate the significance, potentially, of this killing.
Yes, and for now it is a war of words, with Iranian officials making it clear that this is an act of war in their view. The supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei and both the defense minister have vowed there would be a crushing response, severe retaliation. For now, Iran's focus is there's 3 days of public mourning. They've had a top-level security meeting and they will want to organize a massive public funeral for Qaasim Soleimani to send a message to Iran and to the world that this was an act which carried huge consequences for the United States in the region and beyond.
A charismatic man at home, a national hero. Just explain how important he was within the hierarchy of Iranian leadership.
Qaasim Soleimani first came to attention with his brave exploits during the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, and since the late 1990s he's headed this elite Quds Force of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards, and he has risen to be not just Iran's most important military figure, but also a charismatic political personality inside Iran, regarded as second only to Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei. There was even speculation last year that he could be a possible future political leader, but mostly in the region he's been well, keeping his head down. He's a very mysterious character who keeps turning up when there are major covert operations in the region, where he was responsible for creating and orchestrating a network of proxy militias in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Syria, and beyond. But he also used to taunt the United States, taking selfies with the troops with the pro-Iranian forces on front lines, sending barbs on social media directly to Donald Trump. The United States over the years has repeatedly considered taking on Qaasim Soleimani with a targeted killing, but one president after another decided it would just be a step too far with too much consequences, would be seen as a provocation. We're waiting to see now what was the decision-making process which led President Trump to take an act which seems to go against everything he has said all through 2019, saying he didn't want a war with Iran, that while tensions were escalating, he wanted to end what he called the endless wars for the United States. And now he has unleashed a new dangerous chapter. Iran will certainly retaliate. How, when, and where it still remains to be seen, but it will be at a moment of its choosing, and to send a very strong message to the United States.
And the catalyst for this might well have been perhaps the attack on the US embassy in Iraq. But worth pointing out, at least, that General Soleimani played a very important role as a US ally in the fight against Islamic State in Iraq.
Yes, there have been moments over the years where their interests were aligned, where it's true that Qaasim Soleimani's forces in Iraq and Syria played a crucial role in the campaign against Islamic State, and we always wondered at the time whether this would lead to a kind of a rapprochement, a kind of a de facto kind of cooperation, but they remained largely on parallel tracks. I'm in Afghanistan, where many Afghans, many of them forced went to fight in militias in Syria, the Fatah Mayun, that were created by Qaasim Soleimani in the battle there to keep President Assad and his government in power. So he wielded enormous influence. And so the question now is, what kind of revenge will those thousands and thousands of proxy militias want to exact, and what kind of weapons will they be in the hands of the commanders who will now succeed Qaasim Soleimani and will want to take revenge for a man who had cult status within their ranks, although for the United States, Qaasim Soleimani was a cunning adversary, but certainly for them, the face of evil in the region.
And as you say, I mean, pressure on Iran to respond will be immense. But when it comes to the sort of response Iran might take, I mean, so many wars start with miscalculations right around the world, don't they? I mean, could this be seen as a miscalculation by the United States, do you think, in the long run, or what is your view?
Well, it's still early hours in the United States. You've had statements on both sides of the House, from Democrats and Republicans, expressing support for this operation, describing Qaasim Soleimani as an evil mastermind. But questions are also being asked about who took the decision, what was the decision-making process, does the United States now have the capacity to deal with this kind of crisis, an enormous crisis, after what has been months under the Trump administration of hollowing out the State Department, the National Security Council, the kind of usual decision-making process which will be marshaled at a time of crisis like this. And President Trump simply does not have that same kind of apparatus, and certainly in other capitals too, in Britain, in Canada, in Germany, who also have forces on the ground. They'll be asking who took this decision, what was the reasoning, and what preparations for the expected retaliation. Just very last, Dominic Raab, the British Foreign Secretary, has now called for de-escalation.
Okay, all right, Lisa Settin-Cole, thank you very much. Well, Iran's state TV channel has reported the death of General Soleimani. This was how the item was shown on a news bulletin, with the presenter confirming the death, and then a montage of images of the head of the Al-Quds forces. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif has also commented on Twitter. He said the killing of General Soleimani was an extremely dangerous and foolish escalation. He added the US bears responsibility for all consequences of its rogue adventurism. While the killing of General Soleimani has put a direct strain on relations between the US and Iran, there has also been reaction from Iraq, where the US military strike took place. The influential Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, who rejects both American and Iranian influence in Iraq, said he mourned the death and called on his followers to be ready to protect their country. There was also this reaction, though, to the news in Baghdad's central Tahrir Square, where a group of Iraqis appeared to celebrate General Soleimani's death by waving a giant Iraqi flag. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeted similar pictures, saying they showed Iraqis dancing in the streets for freedom, thankful that General Soleimani is no more. Well, our Middle East correspondent Quentin Somerville is in Beirut. He gave us the reaction from there.
Well, there's been outrage from Hezbollah and Iranian supporters here in Lebanon. It's hard to really overestimate the reach that Qaasim Soleimani had across the Middle East. Every single battlefield, his name was either mentioned or his presence was felt. This was a general who reshaped the countries around him. His power went far beyond just military matters. He served Iran's interest in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Syria and elsewhere brutally and efficiently, and he leaves a bloody legacy in all of those countries. So this is an extremely bold action that the United States has taken. And for many years, it was thought that the United States or Israel might target Qaasim Soleimani, but they didn't, because he was untouchable, because the consequences of assassinating him would just be so terrible. Now, Iran has said that there will be severe consequences for his assassination, and it will take revenge. And America, of course, is saying that all Americans should now leave Iraq, but the power of Iran to hit back against this attack against them extends far beyond Iraq. US interests and its allies, Britain and others, will be at more risk now, not just in the Middle East, but across the world. Iranian proxies, whether they're in Iraq or whether they're in Iran or whether they're here in Lebanon, have been pretty busy in the past few years. The war in Syria has taken up a huge number of resources, but it undoubtedly will still maintain the flexibility to be able to use those resources to strike elsewhere and strike at other targets. And there is a sense here in the Middle East that Americans and others now have an even larger target on their back than they did before the killing of Qaasim Soleimani.
Quentin Somerville reporting there from Beirut.